grateful to Incredible's Sports Hub for having invited me to take time and discuss this topic. Pardon me, I'll be looking at my computer screen. It's just here. And our topic of discussion today is child protection and safeguarding in sports. So I'm basically here to talk about the law and the sports. So to start off, my name is Auma Vicky Gloria. Most times I go by Auma, and I am an advocate of the High Court of Uganda. Yes, practicing. I'm enrolled. And then I also have qualifications in advanced sports management that I got from the Uganda Olympic Committee here in Uganda. And this course is offered to basically anyone who would like to study, but you have to start with the sports administrative course, then you go on to the advanced sports course. Now, these courses are guided by International Olympic Committee, and it's from this background that I was asked to actually come and speak to you on the topic of protection and safeguarding of children in sports. Now, today, the major thing, actually a major area of focus, is children. This is because Incredible Sports Hub is all about the children. So today we shall basically focus. Now, to start off this topic, I'd first of all like to discuss what a sport is. And someone will ask, okay, children and sports, so what is that? Well, it's just, in simple terms, it's an exertion of physical activity, and sometimes if it's amateur, then it's basically for entertainment, and if it's a professional sport, then it's a vocation where people actually get paid to play these sports. So your child can play the sport and is either an amateur or a professional, depending on their level of skills and how far they'll go in the sport they'll have chosen. Now, since the sport is out of the way, considering the fact that what we are majorly looking at today are children, we'll start by understanding who's a child. And the fact that Incredible Sports Hub is based in Uganda, then we basically follow the laws of Uganda. So a child, according to the laws of Uganda, that's the constitution, which is a supreme law, a child is a person below the age of 18 years. Hence, what they term as the legal age of consent. So you cannot have a 15-year-old or a 12-year-old considered as an adult, because legally they are considered to be a child, and it has a definition. It's also defined in the Children Amendment, the Children's Act. It was also amended. That's the Children's Amendment Act of 2016. They are all laws of Uganda, and they define a child. So if considering we now know what and who we are talking about right now, that is a child, then go ahead and find out. Now, since we know what a sport is, we know who a child is, we now look at what is this thing called sports law, because a child is going to be involved in sports, and since we are talking about their protection and safeguarding them, obviously laws have to be involved. So what is sports law? Well, sports law can't be exactly defined and pointed out because it's more of an amalgamation of very many different laws. And that's what makes it actually very interesting to study and actually read about and interest oneself about, because a law that doesn't, one that involves one to read into very many areas, is actually something that is very interesting, because you get to know so much, yet you're sort of restricted to one big area, but in that big area there is so much to know compared to other laws that are straight to the point. For example, if you're talking about let's say you're talking about family law, it's basically about the family, and there is not much more that is involved in there. But in sports law, there are so many laws that have to be brought together in order for them to point out, to amount to, in order for them to amount to sports law. Now, in order to define what exactly protection and safeguarding of children in sports entails, we'll have to look into the different laws that bring about this. Now, allow me read something here from the Constitution, whereby our national objective, these national objectives and directives that are in the Constitution, they are to guide different organs and states of the state in implementing different policies. Now, if you're implementing the policy of sport, it is written in the Constitution that the state shall promote recreation and sports for the citizens of Uganda. So it is a national policy and an objective of the state. So considering that, and the definition of a child, who's a person below the age of 18 years, how are we going to protect this person who is below the age of 18 years as they enjoy and carry out the act of being in a sports? Like when, for example, when a child is actually participating in a sport, there's a lot that goes on compared to when it's an individual, because an adult individual, because an adult already has the capacity to choose and decide what they want for themselves. They can go ahead and make a decision. They are not limited by very many things compared to a child, because a child is considered to be below the age of 18 years and they have to get the consent of an adult, most times a guardian, in order for them to participate and also be legally recognized in these sports. Now, going back to the point that I made about sports law involving very many other different sections of the law, I'll now go ahead to actually discuss the different laws that constitute themselves in order to become what they now term as a sports law, because it involves all these laws. First, I'll start with the constitutional law. So one will ask, what is constitutional law? What does it involve? Well, constitutional law is basically more about the Constitution, the main law that governs the country. What does the Constitution say about? Well, like I read earlier, the national objective, it says that the state has to promote sports and recreation. That's one of the things. So is it only about sports and recreation? The Constitution also goes ahead to provide, that is in Article 34, for the rights of children. And the children are, their rights, they're encouraged to actually enjoy themselves, to participate in these different sports. And it's the same Constitution that goes ahead to define a child as a person below the age of 18. So we can see how the Constitution contributes. That's a summary, a bit of how the Constitution contributes to sports law. Now, that's not all. Another thing, another law that contributes or that sports law is constituted of is contract law. Well, children will have to participate in a sport. For example, those who participate as professionals, or even not as a professional, because we have contracts. Now, in contract law, there is always an offer, value, some money. So let's take an example of Incredible Sports Hub. The organization is basically about training kids, upbringing, social work, looking into different skills, team building, and all that. Now, if a person requires their child to play one of the sports that is trained by the members of Incredible Sports Hub, they would be required to sign a contract, basically because you need to know what exactly your child is going to be involved in, who is going to be in charge, what does it take, what are the different criteria involved. Obviously, you have to pay a certain amount of money for the child's needs to be met, because you cannot just have your child up and running without any form of consideration in the organization. Another thing that is in contract law will definitely involve things like money. If the child is playing professionally, what amount of money is this child going to get? How is it broken down? Then who is in charge? Because a child cannot actually contract unless it's for necessities. But at this point, we'll have a guardian, since the law requires someone to register in court as a guardian of this child in order to guide them in this skill. Now, who will be the signee? What are the responsibilities? For example, let's say Incredible Sports Hub in the building of this child's skills. What is expected of the child? What is expected of the guardian? And then another important thing in contracts is that if the parties, that is the child, the guardian, and the organization involved in building the skill, if they have an issue and it has to be resolved, how are they going to resolve it? Remember, one of the major things in sports is that they do not encourage people to actually go to court, which is considered an adversary way of resolving matters. Adversary, that is by going to court. What is encouraged is alternative dispute resolution. Alternative dispute resolution, that is sometimes abbreviated, or most times abbreviated as ADR, is a form of dispute resolution which involves amicable settlement. For example, if we are conflicting, we prefer to mediate, we prefer to negotiate, and there's reconcile, there's conciliation. Those are some of the matters, but most times it's mediation. And in sports, the body that is given that has authority is the Center for Arbitration for Sports. That's where most or all of the sports disputes are resolved. This is because one thing about sports is that it is to encourage growth, it is to bring about unity, and it is to bring about a community. However, where there is more than one person involved, okay, even in some circumstances, some people as individuals they get conflicts, but considering a situation where there will be a conflict, sports encourages that you amicably resolve the matter rather than go the adversarial way. So that is where the Center for Arbitration for Sports comes in. Yes, and one of the recent cases that was in court was the case of Semenya. I think you know Semenya. She's a South African athlete, and she was contesting the fact that there are people who are... She was contesting the fact that the international athlete athlete body wanted to have athletes like her who have high testosterone to be to undergo basically drug to undergo a test and then have that testosterone those levels reduced through different medical procedures, which I can't speak about because I'm not a medical person. But what I'm trying to bring your mind to is that she rejected that and went ahead to file a matter in the Court of Arbitration for Sports. So that is how contract law comes into sports law. Now, we'll move on to the third law. Another law that is actually very much a part of sports law is the labor law. Other people call it the employment law. Now, under the circumstance whereby a person, a child, is going to go into professional sport, that means this employment. This child is actually going to be employed. But then you have to look at the different laws. What does the employment law say about the age of employment? At what age do you have to employ a child? Most times the law provides for a basic minimum of 12, but there are different circumstances under which you can actually employ a child. But then one of the things an organization or a person will have to look into is the fact that you do not employ a child during the time when they're supposed to be at school, because then you'll be infringing on their right to education. Then children are not supposed to be given hard labor. There is what is considered light work, and for further reading and further enlightenment into this topic, I would advise that you read the Employment Act and specifically the Employment of Children Regulations. It breaks concerning labor laws and a child. Another thing about how labor laws come into play in sports law is the fact that as an organization, you're going to employ people. So how many are you going to employ? Are you going to employ full-time or volunteers? How are you going to treat them? What are their benefits? For example, when you have an organization and you have more than 5 people, then there are things like NSSF that come in. That's savings. If you have more than 20 people, then you have to have laws like the regulations, the sexuality regulations, whereby it puts into place how you're going to resolve matters in an organization. How, when a person retires or leaves this job, when a person goes for disciplinary hearing, that is how labor laws come into contract law. Rather, how labor laws are involved in sports law. Thank you. Now, another law that is involved in sports law is what we know as the tort law. To simplify, it is not exactly civil law, but tort law is a type of law whereby when a person offends you. Now, to differentiate these two, I'll have to bring in the aspect of criminal law. I have to bring in criminal law in order for a person to understand, especially someone who has not, a person who is not really involved in the legal world, to understand this. Tort law is more of a law of a person against another person. For example, you go and start encroaching in your neighbor's land. That is me against another person. It is not criminal because criminal laws are against the state. Different states have different criminal laws. For example, in a state, they'll say, do not murder. Okay, do not murder is common in all states. There are certain laws, but then when you say do not murder, that means the person will have killed a human being. However, it's also in the law of the state that do not kill a human being. Another way to differentiate the criminal and the tort is that a tort is against my property. Someone comes and takes away, let's say, my car. My car does not belong to the state, yes, the person can be charged criminally for theft. At the same time, I can also go to civil court and lodge my complaint that this person has taken my car. So in criminal law, most people end up going to prison because it's against the state, but in the tort, they end up paying you. So those are some of the differences. I hope I've separated that. Now, how does tort law come into play in sports law? We have circumstances whereby different athletes may go head to have issues. Obviously, people do conflict. So that involves high, intense physical contact. There are people who do it way and above the limitations that are provided in a sport, because there are some contact sports where you cannot fail to have contact with a person. But we look at the fact that was your contact one that was intentional, or it was just part of the sport. So those are things that you look at. Another very interesting thing that I actually like about sports law, and one of the laws, this is the next law that we are going to talk about. I really like this law. It's called intellectual property law. Now, intellectual property law is one that, like you see, intellectual property, it means someone came up with this idea on their own intellectually, and then they came up with a property, something that they intellectually thought about, and then the law provides that we protect. For example, in intellectual property, there are very many laws involved. For example, there is copyright. With your ideas, you write a book and then you copyright it. If people want to use your idea, they have to pay you. There's trademark. A trademark is a sign or symbol that is synonymous to a group of people. For example, you see how Bolt has his sign, the way he makes the Bolt sign. I think he bends his head and straightens his arms and all. So he can actually go ahead and have that if he uses that to promote his clothing line, he can go ahead and trademark that. The law can protect him. He can do it either internationally, regionally. Internationally is worldwide, regionally, let's say in Africa or Asia, and then, or if Bolt was Uganda, and then yes, in the territory of Uganda. What's interesting about intellectual property is that you need to protect your property, like I mentioned, regionally or nationally or internationally. Otherwise, if you protect your property only in Uganda and then is using the same, they can also protect it according to the laws of that country. But if you protect in Uganda, then you go ahead and protect regionally in Africa, because they are regional bodies and the international body. That's the World Intellectual Property Organization. Then your invention shall be protected worldwide. For example, the Wright brothers, they came up with a plane. So these people had to first enjoy that money before. For example, if I wanted a plane, at least they got a certain percentage of that money. Now, like the current situation, we're having the coronavirus. So one would ask themselves, why is everyone trying to get why is everyone trying to get the vaccine of this coronavirus? It is because they are going to have the right they are going to have the right to distribution of this vaccine. They are going to get all the money, and they will have to be paid. Basically, they will be the sole distributor, and this protection goes on for a certain time. It's depending on how you sign your documents and how you want your property protected. It goes on for a certain number of times, whereby no one can copy your invention, no one can copy those drugs, no one is allowed to manufacture for a certain period of time, and you're the sole distributor, and all the revenues, and it's called loyalties actually. All the loyalties, that's the money you get for having come up with an invention, go back to you. without any interference. That's the beauty of intellectual property. So another thing about intellectual property is that as an organization, you have a name. That is the Incredible Sports Hub. That name has to be trademarked so that people don't go around claiming they are Incredible Sports Hub, and yet there is already an Incredible Sports Hub in Uganda. That's why when someone else comes up with the name Incredible Sports Hub, when the real and original Incredible Sports Hub has already trademarked its name, you can go ahead and go to court and have the other name stripped of the person. Excuse me. Also, they can pay you. For example, I like this example of currently it's now CJ's, but when it was formerly Cafe Java's and then Java's house. Yes, that case was in court, and it's one of the cases that really differentiate. So these two were having an issue, and I was saying I was the first to come up with this name, and then Java House was also saying, but this is a name of a coffee. I also didn't know, but just found out that Java's actually means coffee or something like that. So they went to court, and then Cafe Java's didn't win the case. That's why they now go by CJ's, and the other one, Java House, continues as is. The reason is you have to be original when coming up with a name. You can't come up with the name Pen and then say, Pen was my idea, so now let me go and trademark Pen. No, it has to be an original idea, and it's not supposed to be immoral. It's supposed to fall under, let's say if it's a trademark, it has to be a sign or a symbol and all that. Otherwise, if it's a common name, you gotta name your restaurant Cafe Pen, and then someone goes and comes up with Pen Kitchen, and then you say they are copying you and go to court for that, you're most likely not to win anything out of that. So you need to look into that matter. Now, another law that is involved in sports is a criminal law. How is a criminal law involved in sports? Well, there are people who, as you know, already mentioned, you'll commit a crime against the state. Like robbery, theft. There are so many criminal laws out there. In Uganda, criminal laws are written in the penal code. If you go ahead and commit one, then you will have to actually go to court and respond to the charges against you. There is no way out of it. That's how criminal laws come into sports law. Another law that another branch of law that is in sports law is the revenue and taxation. Yes. Now, when you're in sport, there are different things that you require. For example, equipment. When, let's say hockey, I play hockey. I love hockey. Field hockey to be precise. We need hockey sticks. We need the goalkeeper's pads. We need protective gear. Hockey is played on different grounds. There is the turf, which is either sand-based or water-based. There are very many things involved. Now, are these things manufactured in Uganda? No. Where do you get them? From abroad. They are shipped maybe to Mombasa, then driven or flown, whichever. Now, definitely the Uganda Revenue Authority is going to come and say, please, pay taxes. Yes, taxes are for national development. You cannot go against them, or you cannot say no. It's for our own good. The only issue is whether the taxes are used for our good. That's a question for another day. But right now, you have to pay tax for the equipment you ship in. You may have to buy jerseys if you don't get them here in Uganda and you want another quality or another type. You have to pay tax. You organize an event, you pay tax. you hire a place, there is tax that is paid. There is, for example, sometimes you may be like, but I didn't see I didn't understand when the taxes were taken. There is withdrawal tax. This is tax that is withheld from the source. For example, let's say Lugogo Hockey Stadium. That's where most of the hockey is played, all of it. They hire the grounds from the National Council of Sports. Now, when they hire in the money, the bulk that they pay to National Council of Sports, there is that part that is a percentage that is taken away to pay for tax. That is what they mean by withholding tax. The Uganda Hockey Association will not may not get the direct impact, but this money shall be taken off by the National Council of Sports. So that's briefly how revenue and tax and sports law come into connection. Another interesting part of sports law is agency law. Now, one will ask, what do you mean by agency law? Well, I think in football you've had many people say that this is X and Y sports person's agent. Well, from that agent comes from a context of law known as agency law. Now, agency law involves a person invoking their powers and giving them to another party to act and represent them. So, let's say I'm an athlete. Okay, let's say I have a niece or a nephew, and then they go professional. So, an Incredible Sports Sports Hub is in the business of actually is in the business of developing sports and skills for the children. I will have a contract with Incredible Sports Hub to be the agent of my niece or my nephew. So they will act on my behalf. The beauty about agency law is that the entitlement or the role that I give you, the powers that I bestow onto you, you cannot give them to another person. That's why in agency law, there's that phrase and saying that is, you cannot delegate delegated powers. So if we delegate powers to Incredible Sports Hub, they cannot go ahead and now ask another person to act on behalf of my nephew, and yet I am the one who gave them those powers. So basically, I think I've talked so much. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying. It's crazy to talk to a screen, but we move. Now, remembering we are here on the topic of child safeguarding, child protection in sports. The background was basically about the different laws that are involved, so that means there are very many areas. So now, all these laws come in to protect this one child. For example, I've actually remembered another good example in criminal law. When you rape, it's actually defilement. When you defile a child, you're going straight to jail when proved. So, there you go. You have to be careful. That's why all these laws come up to protect kids, either from violence, extortion, discrimination, theft, because some people will just manipulate a child and take away the money. A child will go work and they'll take away the money. Exploitation, harm, because the Children's Act of 2016, it provides that a child's welfare, their best interest, shall always be put forefront. So one thing I want you to take away from this discussion, even if you forget all the rest, which is fine, you should never forget that whenever a child is involved, their best interest first. So whatever you do, an organization and individual, you're involved with the welfare of a child, the question you should always ask yourself is that, if I do this, is this best for the child? If it's not, then you're going against the best interests of a child. So after discussing these different laws that protect children in sports, would like to look at, okay, what does safeguarding mean? What do you mean safeguarding now? Well, to start off, safeguarding is a subsection. I wouldn't want to say smaller, but it's a subsection that comes from the protection. The protection is a wider picture. For example, if it's a circle, the bigger circle is a protection. Then the circle within the protection circle is then what we call safeguarding. And safeguarding of, let's say, the organization, the individual, the community, the state, the people who are tasked to protect this child. Safeguarding are those different policies, the different steps, the different ideas, the different checks and balances that are in place to prevent a child from being harmed. Now, these checks and balances are there. For example, Incredible Sports Hub, this comes into place whereby Incredible's Sports Hub is required to have certain requirements fulfilled before they get into the space of actually training and endorsing kids with skill and all that. Now, what are the different aspects of safeguarding? Well, in safeguarding, like I said earlier, you have to have policies in place. So what policies, and these policies come from the law, the state. The state will have laws, and then you, as an organization, will draft those policies so that you do not contravene the laws of the state. Now, we have policies concerning the welfare of a child or the individuals who are supposed to be involved with the child. Do you have doctors? Do you have coaches who are actually qualified to train kids? Because you may have coaches who have studied training of adults. Not everyone can handle a child. Are there doctors, specifically pediatricians, who, when this child is injured during this activity, they easily fall in? Do you have people who are concerned with the diet these children take? Why I'm going deep into this is because when you go professional, there is no turning back. You have to have all this in place. In an amateur sport, you may skip one or two, but it's still not advisable. You need to go all the way. Do you have health and fitness people? Do you have people who have studied social sciences? Because we need the social workers around these kids. Not everyone knows how to talk to children, and not everyone should be given the task to be involved with children, because some people are quite different in terms of skill and different in terms of behavior. That's in regard to policy and human resource. So your policy comes from the law, and then human resource are the different people who will help run the organization with all these children involved. Another thing you have to look into is, under the human resource, you also look at their qualifications, but that we mentioned, you also need security, because you don't know what may happen. You may be using an open ground where these children train from, and an incident may occur, so you need security. Another thing you should look at in human resources is the background of these people. Are you going to bring up anyone from anywhere to actually come and take care of these kids or train them? No. Yes, you may have some people who are permanent, others are volunteers. Are you going to just allow anyone who volunteers to partake in these activities with the kids? You cannot do that, because kids are fragile, kids are special, and they need a certain level of attention. For example, I'll give the cases of America. They have people register in case, let's say, a person committed an offense, a sexual offense. They have to register even if they go and serve their term in jail, they have to come back and register as a sexual offender. Do you have those policies in place? In Uganda, are there people who, after going to, let's say, Luzira prison, they come out and then they say, oh, I'm a sexual offender, so they register somewhere, and wherever they're involved, you can tell. Because, and this is not to be discriminative against people who have committed offenses or things like that, but we have to have policies in place. That's why it's called safeguarding. Not sorry, but safe and guard. Not be sorry, then guard. So you have to look into those things. Even in employment of, let's say, expatriates. Expatriates are supposed to be people who have a special skill that is not, that no one that you can't find or easily find in the country. That's why they call those people expatriates. For example, there is, let's say, Incredible Sports Hub has, let's say, an expatriate coming from Germany. This is a person who's really skilled and has, let's say, a PhD in taking care of kids and all the good things, all the good skills and qualifications. There are some steps you have to take because you do not know the security background of this person. You cannot assume just because you talk to them physically, they sent you a CV, you signed a contract. No, you're not supposed to stop there. You have to go the extra mile. There are places like the international police. The international police has data on everyone. At least that's why they're called the Interpol. They connect with different police around the world. So you need to have, to get that person or everyone employed in the organization, a certificate of good conduct. You apply for it at the Interpol. This certificate of good conduct means you've not been involved in any sort of criminal or any other sort of behavior. So at least if someone has that proof, you can work with them. And also remember that in case they commit any offense, at least their fingerprints shall be in the system, so you can easily find out if they commit or not commit an offense. In your human resource, you need people who are differently qualified, specifically in certain specific areas, because if you have kids of special needs, then you have to treat them with extra care and more understanding compared to the other child. Then another thing that is involved in safeguarding is training. Yes, those people are qualified, the human resource that you bring in is qualified, but you still have to go the extra mile and train them and educate them on different areas concerning kids, because the law evolves every day. Kids' parenting styles are different, the ideas are different. The world is global right now. You find kids with smartphones. What they do with those smartphones, I cannot tell you, but that means the exposure is more in this century compared to then. And also in the current situations we are in, there's a whole virus that is going around the world, and most countries are in lockdown. Yes, the lockdown they're easing, different governments are easing out the lockdown, but you have to consider those things. Imagine this child was abroad and then the virus breaks out abroad for competition. How are you going to safely get back make sure this child gets back to their family? If you fail, how are you going to take care of that child abroad? That's why it's good to also, when you're safeguarding, it's good to have partnerships. For example, if you get stuck in the US and the organization has a partner back in the US, they can help with taking care of their child and also bringing them back. You should also have good partnership with the government, because they will decide. For example, right now the debate is still on whether to bring back or not to bring back the Ugandans. But if you're in good partnership with the government, right now the representative of government in sports is the National Council of Sports, and there is a Ministry of Education and Sports. If you're in talking terms with such organizations, then you can easily have, yeah, the children return, and you won't have to be shocked when there's a pandemic. Yeah, so basically, the biggest take homes are sports law is wide, children are vulnerable, and the biggest thing is that you should always consider the welfare of a child 100% of the time. There is no way that you can debate about that. It's all about the welfare of the child all the time. Anything else doesn't count. So yes, that's basically what I have for you. I hope you got something out of it. And then it's been, I don't know, it's personally I feel happy because I've been able to discuss my passion and my qualifications, because I know about the law, I know where to find the law, and I also really love sports. And kids are a gem in this world, so we were all once kids, so that was the beginning of life. So it's always important to protect, because someone also looked out for us in order for us to be who we are. Basically, so yeah, thank you for watching. Sorry about my network, it's a bit on and off, but that's what I had to say. If anyone wants any more discussions, if you want to contact me, please go through the Incredible Sports Hub page. They'll be able to get back to me. For your questions and comments, please leave them in the comment section. I'll be able to get back to you. A big thank you to Incredible Sports Hub. Thank you to Kampala Hockey Club, my club, my family. Thank you to Kampala Hockey Club Swans, Kampala Hockey Stallions. I appreciate all you guys, because all the skills I've learned, the hockey skills I've learned are from you. My love for sports has grown from you. Please go ahead and subscribe to the different pages of Incredible's Sports Hub, and not forgetting Kampala Hockey Club, because that's my mother club. Thank you very much, and have a good evening. Stay safe, protect yourselves, take water, social distancing. All this will end, and we'll be fine. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate, and I'm extra grateful. Please have a lovely week, a great month, and most of all, may 2020 be the year that you always wished it to be. Bye-bye.